Good evening. I'm Mayor Jen Grigoraitis. Thank you for being here tonight for our first opportunity for public engagement around this process. Just a little bit of housekeeping. These microphones are for MMTV. They don't amplify, so if you want to come move right up front, these seats are available. If that will help you hear the presentation, we will try to talk as loud as we can. This is the initiative to replace the Melrose Police headquarters and renovate and/or rebuild our 3 fire stations. And this is, to date, the largest public works project in the city's history. I'm joined tonight by Denise Gaffey, our city planner and lead project manager, Police Chief Kevin Fallier, Fire Chief John White, and Glen, Gollrad, and Cassie, Plunkett from Dorr and Whittier, who are project architects. I also want to take a moment to thank the Melrose Public Schools for hosting us here in the Learning Commons, and to MMTV for providing the recording of this meeting. I also want to acknowledge that in the audience tonight is Melrose Public Schools Superintendent Adam Delady, and Ward 3 City Councilor Rob Stewart, and then several members of our Public Safety Facilities Committee, including at-large City Councilor Ward Hamilton, Jim O'Laughlin, one of our resident members, firefighter John McCarron, I think I saw back there, and Lieutenant Paul Norton of the Melrose Police Department. Thank you all for being here and for all the work that you've done this far. Just to give a little bit of history before we dive into the presentation, there was a yes vote made by Melrose voters last November of 2023 to approve a debt exclusion question authorizing this project. The question binds us to 2 things. We must touch all 4 buildings, and we are capped at $130 million, which will be paid for through a municipal bond, which is a fancy word for borrowing. With this charge in mind, I established the Public Safety Facilities Advisory Committee earlier this year. The members of this committee, which include city staff and officials, residents with expertise in architecture, construction, and project management, and several members of the Melrose Police and Fire Departments, as well as both our chiefs, are asked to advise my administration on important issues with these projects. One of the first questions that we addressed as a committee was regarding the location for the new Melrose Police headquarters. While initial planning by the city indicated the Ripley School site on Lebanon Street as the likely location for the new police headquarters, additional evaluation and consideration led us to shift focus to the Beebe School site. This decision was driven primarily by 3 factors. The Beebe School site is located at the geographic heart of Melrose and is only 2 blocks from our current downtown police headquarters. This location will help to ensure adequate emergency response times, enable residents to access the station by public transit or as a pedestrian, and remain a central community hub and resource. The second issue is that our initial engineering evaluations indicated that construction at the Ripley School site would require extensive and costly use of rock blasting to remove ledge at an estimated minimum cost of $1.5 million. Project architects believe, based on their current understanding of the site, that there will be little to no blasting necessary to build at the Beebe School location, which both reduces our overall project costs and minimizes impact on neighbors. The Beebe School is currently used as a temporary location for the Melrose Public Library and will be vacant as of early 2025 when the library moves back into its renovated facility. Moving the police headquarters to the Beebe School allows us to move this project forward without disruption or interruption from any user groups, which includes our current tenants at the Ripley School, the SEAM Collaborative, which is a special education collaborative school that serves Melrose and area students, and they currently have a lease to occupy that space through August of 2026. I know that the Beebe School was a topic of discussion in 2019 when an outside firm was hired by the city to assess the use of that building in a different capacity by the school department. At that time, estimated cost to bring the Beebe School to code, which excludes any asbestos abatement work, systems upgrades, or finishing work, was estimated to cost between $6 and $10 million, and a funding source for that project was never identified or secured. Given the changes to the construction and materials market that has occurred in the ensuing 5 years, we would estimate that that $6 to $10 million project cost would come with a minimum 20% escalation. For those of you that have been following along, that is not a project that the City of Melrose has the funding to immediately put into effect. So there is no identified use or funding source for the Beebe School after it becomes vacant in January of 2025. With all of this information, the members of the Public Safety Facilities Advisory Committee unanimously recommended siting the new police headquarters at the location of the former Beebe School. Tonight's meeting is the first of many opportunities for the Melrose community to learn more about this project. In addition to this evening, which will cover initial plans and drawings of the Tremont Street Fire Station and the new police headquarters, and there's some physical examples in the back to take a look at, abutters and neighbors will be invited to smaller neighborhood meetings to address any local level concerns. MMTV will make tonight's meeting available as soon as possible online and on local cable access channels, and we will be sharing tonight's presentation on the city website. We welcome your questions and feedback, and here tonight or in future by email or phone to City Hall. And with all that being said, I'll turn it over to City Planner Denise Gaffey and our architects Glen and Cassie to begin tonight's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. As the Mayor just mentioned, I am working as the city's project manager for this project, and this role as project manager is one that I have been in for my over 27 years working for the city. So I've managed many other capital projects. So I feel like I think it's a great decision for the city to have somebody, a liaison in the city in this role. It's very important to be coordinating closely with the end users, including the police and fire departments, the architects. My role will also involve overseeing all the procurement for this project, attending all the design meetings, and basically just making sure this project stays on time and on budget. So that is my role. I've been involved with the police station or public safety initiative for very many years. I worked on the designer selection process many years ago when we had a competitive process and interviewed a number of different architectural firms to help us identify, help us get to the point where we are today. And very pleased to be part of the group that selected the architects who are in front of you today, Dorn Whittier. They are very experienced architects. They do predominantly work in public safety, and we're really lucky to be able to continue our engagement with them. So I'm going to turn this over to Glen and to Cassie to provide an overview of the work that the group, the committee, and the city has done to date with the design of these two projects.
Quite an introduction. To Denise's point, Dorn Whittier first got involved in 2017 with the first version of the study. That came and went and got shelved for a while. And last year, when a reformed building committee, or study committee at the time, got together, they asked us to see if we could pick up where we had left off. And it was a good spot to start from. We were able to fast start the current version of the project as it exists now. And when we got started this year, right off the bat, the mayor's office and Denise's office pulled together a really sharp crew, and this facilities advisory committee are really the main group we answer to, and will make decisions to the mayor's office. And again, it's a stacked group of really talented local folks that have their heart and soul invested in the project. But with all the pieces in place, we've been going since about mid-June this year and have started what's called schematic design. And the first phase of the project is the new police station and the Engine 2 facility on Tremont Street. And we're about 3/4 of the way through schematic design right now. And that'll put us in a position to get our first real cost estimates in late October. And to Denise's point, that's where our first real feedback in the here and now, looking at current construction costs and escalation and what that looks like next year. That'll keep us in check. If any adjustments need to be made, it's schematic design. We can tweak and pare back, or if things are looking good, make sure the departments are getting everything that has been asked for and programmed, right? We have worked with them to develop a what I would call right-sized space needs analysis, and that's what form the building blocks for what these buildings are. It's rather boring spreadsheet data in a way, but it's the granular data we collected to really understand what the police department and the fire department needed. And that's how we start the essentially the fun part of the building, of designing the buildings. And so as part of the schematic design package, we'll have the aesthetic begun to be shaken out. We'll have early site design information so that that can be estimated correctly. We'll have a couple of options for mechanical and electrical systems. I think that's important in the community because these are targeted as aggressively efficient buildings. And we are excited that the community supports that. It's important. What else? I guess the other piece to touch on is while we've started the schematic design on the first two buildings, we've also engaged with our hazardous materials, our geotechnical and other pre-design consultants to start looking at the Central Fire and the East Side Fire Station. And that was a recommendation that came out of one of the Facilities Advisory Committee meetings. So that's in a big part what's the right way to put it? Wind up to the more fun aspects. I'm going to let Cassie talk about where our designs have come from and come to, and where we're at.
Thank you.
And obviously, chiefs, if you have anything to chime in, please do. Sure.
So the first project that we'll review tonight will be Engine 2, and as Glen mentioned, in the last 4 months, the team has met a bunch. We've done a lot of work to really work through each of these projects. For Engine 2, we started by reviewing many different orientations of the building on the site, and this was the preferred option, which the orientation really isn't that different from the current orientation of the building. The main entry is on the north, the top there with the little arrow. The apparatus will still discharge onto Tremont Street, and we plan to have the parking flow off of Melrose Street behind the building and loop around back onto Tremont Street. And we will maximize any remaining space on this tight site with vegetation, trees, green space. For the floor plans, we spent a lot of time refining the program and the plans to really right-size this building, but also allow for future growth. And it will also allow to be the temporary flex space during the construction of the other projects. It will be a 2-story building with the green space, the first floor on the right there. The green space will be the public lobby where people can enter, and then there'll be 3 apparatus bays and a maintenance bay also on the first floor. On the second floor will primarily be the living quarters for the department. And when we were thinking about the plan, we also had to think about what this would look like 3-dimensionally. So that also influenced how we pushed and pulled this plan to right-size it and developed this design. It was always important to the working group that we considered this as a neighborhood fire station. And we also looked at the other municipal buildings within the city that utilize a lot of masonry construction, so it seemed appropriate that we would also utilize that for this project. The main entry is on the right side there. We articulated the lobby with some larger glass curtain walls to let a lot of daylight and to create this welcoming space within there. We also plan to place an antique truck that the department has on display. The corner that will be the corner of Melrose Street and Tremont Street. And then up above that space, you can also see a lot of glass. There will be a conference room in there. And the remaining spaces are more the living quarters, so those are smaller window openings. Again, we're trying to maximize the green space, whatever's left on the site here, and what's also nice about doing all these projects together is that we can have a coordinated design. Maybe we can use some of the same materials, but each building will be unique and specific to its site and surrounding context. Chief, is there anything you'd like to add about?
Yeah, just from the start of this project, we are confined by the size of the lot. And the amount, when we first saw it, we looked at the needs of the fire department, and we really had a 3-story building there with a large meeting community room to do training in and whatnot. But also, sorry, let me back up. Also, while we're doing the project sequentially, when headquarters will be done, the headquarters apparatus will have to be in that station also. So we'll have to function out of there also. But when all the projects are all said and done, there'll probably be maybe one pump there and hopefully maybe an ambulance if we continue to grow the way we want to grow. However, we figured that the station has always been thought of as a wonderful neighborhood station, and we wanted to keep it that way. And since we were limited by size, we had no parking even to put a large meeting room there. So that was very easy to take that right off the top, so to speak, and then get that building looking more like a neighborhood station, even though it's much larger than the current station, but also has to house a lot of our apparatus that's been, as you notice, the current engine 2 has the bump out on it that stores our ladder truck. This will now look a lot better, storing that there and the various other equipment we'll have. And that's about, yeah, where we're at right now.
Could I touch on one thing? I think Cassie and the chief touched on something really important that is not particular just to Engine 2, but also works out through the course of all 4 buildings. And that is, with this building being what we keep calling right-sized, it allows that flex space for the future construction projects. That's important because temporary facilities for both fire and for police are extraordinarily expensive. When we have to house firefighters and, of course, police dispatch, temporary dispatch facilities are incredibly expensive. And not to get ahead of myself, but the obvious process by which the new police station is built, you get to turn the switch on there, and before you shut down the old one, you make sure everything is ironed out and running well, and then shut down the previous facility. So I think it's worked out quite well for Melrose that you guys have this opportunity to phase things. It's threading a bit of a needle. You know, there will be some days where the fire guys are tight, but this station will house the central fire folks when needed during construction, but then also have enough room for growth later. The police project, as the mayor pointed out, we quickly saw that if possible, the former BB school site was advantageous for all the reasons she mentioned. Certainly the Ripley site could work. That's what we showed and truth tested in the study last year. But if it got acceptance, and it seems that it has, this presents a much easier path forward with, I don't know, I think we calculated 12 or 14,000 cubic yards of rock would have had to been blasted and removed from the Ripley site to make room. And primarily for circulation. I mean, the building itself, the new building is not proposed to be much bigger than the Ripley building that's there now. And you'll see similarly with BB. But in terms of pros and cons, it's sort of self-explanatory. It's certainly the pros of the Ripley site where it was a known entity. It's what we were tasked with originally to make happen. And it does have the benefit of having relatively low-maintenance neighbors with the cemetery next door, but being sensitive to the folks who live up on the hill behind as well. It did seem to have a little more quiet site logistics issue, which was nice. But BB School site, as the team has touched on, is a more central location. All that ledge does not need to get processed. And it seems to work out pretty well with occupancy of the library temporarily being there just for another few months. Again, it means we save time and money by being able to start the police project on schedule and not have to wait for, is it the SEAM Collaborative at Ripley to be done. And we're seeing, while inflation and escalation has cooled down, it's still about 4.5% or 5% a year. So that's a lot of money that doesn't need to be spent if we can avoid it. But to be fair, I mean, as we've talked about, it was not the bill of goods that was voted on, right? So we look forward to hearing any questions or concerns about using the BB site. But now I think I've covered that portion, and it is back to Cassie.
All right, so similar to fire, we reviewed many site plan iterations with the working group, and we found that the program fit really nicely at the BB school site. We found that the building footprint is actually a little bit smaller than even what the BB school footprint is, and the heights of the two buildings will be very similar, if not exactly the same. They both have 1- and 2-story components. We're proposing 2 parking lots. On the right would be the public parking lot, and the working group found it very important to keep the connection to the senior center, which you can see at the top of the site there. There will also be electric vehicle charging stations within each parking lot. On the left will be the personnel staff parking lot in a more secure location. We are pulling the building, as compared to the BB school building, away from the ledge that's at the back of the site. For those of you not familiar with it, there's about a 20-foot grade difference from on the back of the site there. And the BB school is really right up against it. If you're up on South High Street, you're, looking down on it. So we're pulling the building away from that, maximizing the green space, using the vegetation not only for aesthetics, but also for screening from some of the parking areas. And yeah, it was just a really nice, it just fit nicely on the site. And then looking at the plans, we spent a lot of time refining these plans, making sure that they were right size, but also allowed for future growth. On the right is the first floor plan. The green spaces are the public spaces, where the main lobby and entry will be, along with a large training community room. And then the other spaces on the first floor will be personnel, secure office spaces. On the second floor, the green spaces are the lobby and a conference room, and then the rest are administration and secure personnel spaces. And as we were working through the plan, as you'll see, it's really compact. So when we started thinking about it 3-dimensionally, we wanted to pull out some of these public spaces so a lot of daylight could come into these spaces and it could feel welcoming and warm and, not a dark space. So this was the design that we developed. As you can see, the large glass wall would be the lobby, the public lobby, and we are using glass to really articulate these public spaces. Again, at the same time, there are a lot of secure spaces within a police station that you don't want, large glass around. So we're using smaller punched opening style windows in those spaces because they still need natural daylight. And we're just focused on creating this sense of community and transparency within the lobby and public spaces. We're going to coordinate the materials with what we're using at Engine 2 and the other projects. Again, the masonry, because that's what we're seeing at a lot of the municipal buildings within the city. And, like we've all mentioned, we're still in the schematic design phase. So there's a lot of refinement that we're still going to do. We'll develop, more articulate images and plans, but the working group has, really been working hard to get the project to this point. And with that, I guess, Chief, do you have any?
Thank you. I'll make it brief because I know the Q&A is probably going to take up the most of the night, but I just wanted to start by thanking the last two administrations, certainly Mayor Jen's administration, for not letting this project stall when it was passed, prior to her coming on, and then Mayor Broder's administration for getting this ball rolling, and then certainly last but not least is everybody out in the audience, the community, and that vote was about 60-40 in favor of this whole project. And I can't underscore what that means to the men and women that work in both of our departments, that it showed us that you guys care about us, right? And that's huge for city employees to know that. But some of the just real quick key points that I want to address, and they've already been addressed, is the BB location should alleviate, I think, 98% of the concerns from the last time we met, which was the kind of faraway location of the Ripley School. So we're excited that we're going to be close to everybody. Everybody's going to be close to us. We don't go flying in and out of the police station with lights and sirens. We're going to be good abutters, neighbors to the community, the ward that we're going to be moving into. If there's any questions, I think we're still in that ward, but you could talk to our business neighbors and residential neighbors now if there's any noise complaints. We don't put our sirens on and run out like crazy people. Our offices, after roll call, they're assigned sectors, and their offices, not officers, their offices are out in the street. We're split up into sectors, and in theory, in an ideal world, they're already out ready to respond. So it's going to be very rare where you're going to see an officer and a cruiser making noise, coming in and out, and making any type of potential dangerous situation. The other point I want to address is, and you see the size of the building, that's something we've needed for a long time, but this is something we're going to need for another long time. So we're not building for 2027, we're building for 2057, 2047, and that's what we have to all remember, that future growth, future needs of the police department, future needs of the community are continually evolving. And my last job, I was fortunate enough to go through this exact same process with another police department, from having that picture with the shovel and the hat to actually picking out paint colors and equipment and furniture. I have good experience, and what really helped us last time, and we've already started it with Lieutenant Norton, Detective Reardon, is visiting police stations that have just gone through it and talking to the people, the men and women that work in there, what works, what didn't work, and how can we make this the best for the community. Because the last thing we want to do is build a police station or fire station, and then you're already out of space in 2 years. And that's happened. We visited police stations, and they've said, this is brand new, and we already are out of space. This design here is not going to have that problem. So if there are any questions about, and we haven't had any yet, but I'll throw it out there, why is it so big? Because that's what we need now, and that's what we need in the future. The Q&A will probably address it, but I might as well address it now. There's no firing range on here. I know that was a concern on some of the social media. We cut that out actually a long time ago, and it might be in some old designs that you may have seen, and that was a savings to the tune of about $4 million. So that's a want, not necessarily a need, so we're trying to do the best we can there. The other thing is we're not knocking down the BB estate, okay? We're knocking down the BB school. One of the selling points, or one of the things that we really liked, and part of the design, as you'll see, is trying to make almost like a campus for the police department, the Milano Center, the BB Estates, the Fuller House, so it's welcoming. And that, that big glass part right in the front there is a huge community room that's going to seat about 50 people. And that's not the police department's community room. That's the community room, and that's why it's called a community room. It's for everybody. It's for Chiefs white people, too, because I know there were some cuts made on their end. They wanted a community room, et cetera. But we have one, right? We can share all that stuff. We can have, anybody in the community can use that. So probably talk longer than I wanted, but my main points were we're very excited about this new location. And when we had the previous location, and I'm on record saying this, pull up the old meetings online, it was the best alternative at the time, and we were trying to do the best we can. And we'd be foolish to stick our heels in and say, well, that's what we picked, we're going to stick with that. as Glenn talked about, the significant cost savings, brings us back closer to the city, the geographic center of the city, and there were some other timetable issues where if we can start on time here, I'm a taxpayer as well, we're gonna save some money, and it's actually a better location, to be honest with you. So those are my talking points.
Hi, my name is Ginny Venuti. I'm a Melrose resident, and I have two questions, basically. I do think BB is a better location, but my question is, when we're done and the police department moves there, will we be selling the current location of the police department and using that money to offset some of the cost? That's question one. And question two is, a few years ago, had community engagement after community engagement because it was imminent that we needed to open another school because we didn't have enough classroom space. And is the city saying that we no longer need additional classroom space? Also, is the city realizing and acknowledge that if we give up a school site, which is a very hard thing to come by because it's not like one little parcel, that they're okay with us being forever a four-school community, and that will meet our needs for the next 30 years, or the length of the police department's building, longevity there. That's my two questions.
I'll start with your first question regarding the current police department location. So that is not anything that's been planned yet. That will obviously need to be a discussion about what are the options and feasibility of that site. To your point, that is property owned by the city that can be repurposed. We would need to understand the need, the feasibility, the cost, and then that would need to involve the city council to approve any proposed plan for what to do with that property. So that property will go vacant in 2027 when the police move out of it. So that's something that we'll be looking at in between now and then. And then your second question, your second question, I think it was two parts, I apologize.
Yes, my second question was, we were all told a few years ago that it was imminent, we didn't have enough student space, that we needed to open a 5th elementary school. Are we saying now that what we have for space is adequate for our student population going forward for the next 30 years? And do we acknowledge that we can't just get another school site? It's not just the school building, it's all this parking, it's the playground area. That isn't something in such a dense city we could just recreate.
So I think to the question about the Melrose Public Schools 30-year plan, I can't speak to enrollment for the schools. Our enrollment numbers are not where they were in 2019. The pandemic played a significant impact on school enrollment. We've largely been very stable. Candidly, there has been no planning for what to do with the Melrose Public Schools population since 2019. That's a process that we have stood up. There's a school building master plan committee that's been formulated consisting of myself, Superintendent Delaney, city and school staff, and there was money that was appropriated by the council in 2023 to begin to assess all of our existing school buildings through an educational lens, understand where are the opportunities for growth, where we need it, and to really assess where do we go next with our schools. From a financial perspective for the city, bringing the BB online as a code compliant building would have been about $10 to $14 million, depending on how much work we did in 2019. We should assume a 20% cost escalation to that project to get that project going now or in future years. There is no identified source of funding for a project of that scope. So absolutely, school buildings and school building needs is something that we are considering in partnership with Melrose Public Schools. But that is a project that is going to take several years worth of data for us to really stand up.
So giving up the site, we might be in essence shooting ourselves in the foot.
I don't think we're
Before we do the
shooting
school
ourselves in the foot. I think a recognition that that is not a building that we could put students in without an investment of about $10 to $14 million.
Even though it was a private school for all those.
It's a school that's owned by the city of Melrose and has been maintained by us. We rented it out. It's been vacant since 2019 until the library moved in. So the feasibility study from 2019 indicated that there has been no meaningful asbestos abatement. There are HVAC and heating systems that would need to be updated, windows that would need to be replaced, ADA compliance that would need to be brought in. So it's absolutely a significant undertaking, and it's absolutely a need. We need to talk about schools and where best to put people and how best to repurpose all of our school buildings, including the ones that currently have students in them that we know have real facilities needs that we need to address. The recognition is that we have the funding to do this project now, and we wanted to make the best decision for where to put the police department, and every delay that we have, which would include a year delay at Ripley because that building is currently in a valid lease, would have resulted in cost to this project.
Yeah, I didn't question that one. I was just worried that you're gonna come back and say we need to build we need a new school site because we don't have enough school base, you know?
I cannot speak for, I'm looking at the superintendent. We do not anticipate coming before you asking you to build a new school.
Okay,
Sorry, sir.
Plus there are
Sorry.
five, not four.
Sorry, say that.
There are 5 elementary schools.
And there are 5 elementary schools currently. Thank you.
Not 4.
well, one's an early education.
No, there are 5. We have Cooper, Horace Mann, Winthrop, Roosevelt, and Lincoln. We have 5, and then a kindergarten at the Franklin.
Okay. Forgot one.
Hello, I'm Mike McLaughlin. I'm at 290 West Foster Street. I'm a direct abutter of the property. Appreciate that early in the presentation, there was kind of a spaghetti chart that showed community. Appreciate that there were no direct abutters at the last site. Appreciate that there have been conversations with folks at the Milano Center, et cetera, and appreciate that there's a working group. A question, are any direct abutters to the BB school on the working group?
No, there are not to my knowledge.
Is there an intention to put some on?
We can certainly considering adding someone to the group. It's already like a 14-person group, but absolutely happy to consider that if that's something that there's an interest in.
I would just think it's as
Yeah.
important a voice as any other.
Absolutely, and we have 4, we also have all 4 sites have for both of our, we have 2 neighborhood fire stations. Obviously, our central downtown fire station doesn't really have direct abutters other than city buildings. So throughout that process, we'll be engaging with each of those abutters as those projects start to come online. So we can absolutely consider having an abutters group that helps us to really think about some of the impacts of construction during that. It's a great suggestion.
And I think part of the suggestion comes from at least frustration on my part as a direct abutter, finding out when Councilor Rob knocked on my door and said it was basically a foregone conclusion, and the vote had already taken place that it was coming here, and it seems like the design was already made for an area that is not a residential area. It has no resident. I looked at some of your work in Situate, Medfield, other places that have absolute residential character to what was built there. That is a garish recreation of the BB school, which was a garish recreation of some other terrible school. So if there's opportunities for, this is my view out my front door. So if there's opportunities to make it look much more like any of the other architectural buildings I've seen you all design, that would be wonderful. And an opportunity for that voice to be heard.
Absolutely. No, it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And could you all speak to the asbestos abatement during construction?
Yes. Most likely, right, and honestly, the only report that we've seen so far is a preliminary asbestos and other hazardous materials containing report. What we're seeing more and more is it becomes more cost-effective and safe to sometimes treat the entire building as if it's hazardous, and it's a little easier to control, things like air quality and where the materials are going and how it gets picked apart, as opposed to, I think, what is more traditionally, as you can imagine, you go into the building and meticulously, folks in hazardous material suits with aggressive air filtration and negative pressurization systems scrape and pull and remove the bits and pieces and triple bag it and get it off site. I guess I'm getting unnecessarily into the weeds. But
I mean, a question, there won't be a negative air system while you're removing the asbestos.
Well, there will be. That's part of the construction documents would include a pretty aggressive specification about monitoring the air quality, tracking where the materials are going. That's starting right now with a more in-depth assessment of what exactly is in there. Maybe it's not as bad as we think, but we assume the worst.
It was about a $2 million remediation when it was looked at for the school budget.
For the, sorry,
Asbestos remediation
For the
at the
BB
BB
school?
To make it a BB school. The asbestos remediation at the time was about $2 million.
no, the,
If you look at the cost increases, pre-asbestos remediation, post-asbestos remediation, it was
I
about $2 million.
believe so, but I don't have the numbers directly in front of me. I don't want to,
But it's not then a part of the budgeting considerations when it's $1.5 million of ledge work in the Ripley, but $2 million in asbestos. You guys aren't aware of increased costs due to asbestos remediation at the school.
It's,
even though there was a prior study done by a second set of architects that showed there was?
sure, no, if I may, Mayor.
Yeah, of course.
We've assumed pretty much the worst with either building on either site, and it's been carried since the beginning as part of the project budget.
It's budgeted for negative air remediation. I know what that actually means, so I'm asking
Sure.
specifically.
No,
Because
and
you don't
I am
have the
not a
HVAC
hazard.
abilities to do that, so I don't know how you do it.
To negatively pressurize a space?
Right.
Yeah, it's a tarping and paneling and fan and filtration system, but that, to be fair, that is not my area of expertise. We use a company called Universal Environmental Consultants. They have worked with us for decades, and they are aggressive about protecting the environmental quality around these kinds of remediation projects. I'm not sure I'm answering your question or allaying any fears,
Well,
but it's,
that's okay.
I think
It's just asbestos.
Just to clarify, I mean, because I've managed a lot of the projects locally in Melrose over the years. We've worked almost exclusively with Universal Environmental Consultants. Actually, we still work with them in our smaller projects too in the schools. But it's very customary in any building project that we will encounter and we plan to encounter hazardous materials, most specifically asbestos. So that is always going to be part of the budget. There is a line item in the budget that was presented to the community for hazmat, consulting services and remediation. So it's built in. It's going to be one of the first things that the demo contractors do.
It was for a different location, that's why I'm asking.
True, but the study that was done at that time was very conceptual, and so they were carrying funds to remediate in the Ripley School. We would have encountered a similar issue in the Ripley School. So we feel confident we're carrying sufficient funds to remediate.
Sir?
Hi, my name is Bill Barton. I'm a resident of Melrose. Mayor, thank you for having this excellent meeting tonight. And my question is about the $130 million approved by the voters. Is that an absolute number, or is that inflation adjusted? And if it is inflation adjusted, what are your projections now for the bond issue that will happen?
So it's an absolute number by law. The question binds us to the fact that it listed the $130 million and that it listed that we would do work to a police station and 3 fire stations. So we are bound by the ballot question to touch 4 buildings and to be capped at $130 million. If there should be a need for additional funding, that would either need to go back on a ballot question to voters for it to be bonded, or I would need to seek funding, alternative funding sources through the city council. So we're locked in at $130 million regardless of where inflation goes.
Hi, I'm Susan Barron. I am in a butter to the BB school. I had a question. I have 2 questions, really. First of all, about blasting. These many of the homes in that particular area, including mine, are very old. They were built in the late 1800s, and blasting would not be good for those homes. And I'm wondering if anything like that is actually anticipated. And my second question has to do with parking. I see that you have parking on there, but I really don't know if the parking that you've put in there will accommodate not only the people who drive and work at the police station, but also the police cars and the visitors. Are they really going to accommodate that, or are people going to drive around and say, oh, let's go on to this street or that street and start parking in the neighborhood? Because I'll tell you, North and South High Street, they were sort of built before street widths were established by a certain width was established by, I don't know, the city or the state, but they had to be a certain width. These are not that width. They were narrower streets. And people parking on them, it's already a very interesting situation there right now. We live in peace, but the thing is that how can you make sure that that people just don't drive around and park up there?
Speak to it.
Yes.
I'll speak to, thank you for your question. I'll speak to the parking question. The blasting thing is a little bit above my pay grade, but we did a pretty good in-depth study when we were, where did she go? I'm sorry. We did a pretty good in-depth study on what our needs are currently and what they could be in the future, especially with the community room that's going to be planned there. Some people, that's the first I've heard that it might not be enough. Most of the people who have seen our design have says that's too much parking. So we got, in my opinion, and the people who have helped estimate this, way more parking than we probably need. And if you look at the design up there, or that was a previous slide, to the left of the building, if you're looking at it, is all the police parking. That's very easy to conceptualize. How many cruisers we have, how many people are working, and then the crossover of the shifts. We have ample parking on that side for sure. And then on the right side, I forget what it was, but maybe another 20 or 30 or so public parking spaces. Very rarely are we ever going to have that many people there. The only time we would be if we had a training in that community room or a community meeting. That should accommodate it. And the other option is, and I think, like I was talking earlier about a campus feel, the Milano Center, the BB Estates, they're our partners, right? There's some overflow parking there as well. I wouldn't anticipate much, if any, having to go onto side streets or anything like that.
Thanks. I get the hard question about blasting versus hammering. If any rock removal was needed, we would first talk with our geotechnical engineer about the best way to approach that, or design-wise, can we simply avoid it, which is our primary option. On a project that I'm working on, we're just finishing up now in Stoughton, we had the same exact concern. The site that a new fire station was going on, as soon as they started site work, they uncovered a gigantic ledge outcrop that had to be removed. And this is a site not quite as dense as West Foster Street, but it was a 4 or 6 week public engagement round and round with the engineers, with the blasting specialist, in this case from Maine, and looking with our structural engineer and our geotechnical engineer, basically what's worse, 3, 4, 5 weeks of those gigantic excavators with the rock hammers, this kind of bang, 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 versus controlled explosions that have state maximum. And the fire chief might be able to talk about details around blasting a bit more, but basically the ground is only allowed to move a certain amount around the blast area, and it has to dissipate quite quickly. And it's triple monitored. All the abutting properties were surveyed, videoed, documented, so that before and after could be compared to make sure there was no impact. And I think it was, for me, it was the first project dealing with blasting that we all stood there the first day, and it was almost a non-event. It just kind of went poof, which, I don't know, I'm not a seismologist, but it seemed a lot less disruptive to the abutters than 8 hours a day of 3 or 4 or 5 60-ton excavators hammering all that time. So if we need it, we'll do our due diligence with the team to make sure that there's no disruption. But again, the first choice is to just avoid it.
You do have parking spaces on ledge there.
Yep, in that corner. That's right.
So I would imagine we would or not have parking.
Well, at a schematic level, we're still working out all the specifics, and I'm not sure if that ledge is at a grade that would need to be cut down, or it's at, so it's.
Good reason to have it abutter in here.
Well, then you're hired.
It is.
We'll get you on the committee.
Sir?
Thanks, everyone. So my name's Henry Kesner. I live at, I'm on North High Street. And before I say anything, I just want to recognize a few things. First, I support this movement, this bill, and the project itself, the nature of the project. I also want to recognize the chief, what you shared already. That allayed a lot of my questions. So I'm only here with 2, but I wanted to recognize that. A big word that was shared earlier in the bubble chart was community, and a lot of the BB community is here, and so I'm channeling a little bit of who's not speaking right now, and also who couldn't make it tonight. We're a tight community. There's a lot of swirl and talk of this. This all came pretty sudden. There's a lot of shock right now, and so they're processing it. part of that is because we're all, a lot of us are Lincoln parents, some of us are Roosevelt parents, but we walk our kids. These are one-way streets. There's a lot of, it's a tight, you see it here. It's a lot of tight community. Before you know it, you hit the railroad tracks, and that's on my mind as a risk. But I would love to hear a little bit more thought of, I saw the pro and con list of the two decisions, and pretty light on the con, and we're butters, so we're thinking about it, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on that aspect. And then my second question is back to another slide, which was really these two options. I appreciate there's probably been a lot of conversation before I entered the room here, but curious why the current space itself wasn't sort of listed, considered, I'm sure there's probably a quick answer here. Don't expect slides, but we'd love to hear that.
I'll take the second one first, because it's probably pretty self-evident that a 1920s, 1930s era, 1907 Bell telephone switchgear station of about 7,000 square feet is drastically undersized and not safe for the police department to operate out of. Even back in the 2017 version of the study, we realized it was easily a 28 or 30,000 square foot need at that time, a little bit more conceptual space needs analysis to really meet like the minimum that would be acceptable for now and, to the chief's point, reasonable future growth. So even if we covered that entire site with a building and had no parking, it would still be difficult and probably not serve the city well enough to be able to be behind it. What comes to mind about your first question about the sort of traffic flow in the tight neighborhood and some of the conditions, I'll let the chief speak to shift change and things like that, the chief speak to that. But it occurs to me that if a new school were designed on that site, the traffic impact might be a bit different and a little more challenging with parent drop-off and that sort of thing. Although understanding that Melrose and in that neighborhood is probably a pretty walker-friendly neighborhood school.
It was a school 5 years ago.
I understand that.
No issues.
Right, but by current MSBA standards, what a new elementary school site or new elementary project would look in that site is not known. Oh, yeah, we do have between our civil engineer and our traffic engineers, we will look at in detail the traffic in the neighborhood as it is now and the projected increase, decrease, or net impact to traffic with the previous function, the current function, and the proposed police function. So that'll be information that will be available for everyone to look at and talk about and disseminate. And that's underway right now. They've just been contracted, so in the next few weeks, you may see them setting up sensors or other equipment.
Anyone else want to offer
No,
anything?
sorry, I know. I'm talking a lot. My apologies.
No, that helps in some aspect. I was curious. I mean, lots of one-way street. I mean, I appreciate what the chief said earlier about respectful of how they exit property, so on. Really appreciate that. And I know that. I've dear friends in the force. I just would love to, just hear more of the thoughts there. When you read kind of the why, and that's what I looked at in all the little publications I do have access to, it's a lot of, it's about location, it's about cost and everything, so I get that. This location just is, it is what is a tight community, very residential. You saw we saw pro of the other space being less so, and that was a pro. But the flip is that this is tight. I mean, honestly, when I walk my daughter, really the hardest part is literally coming down on Vinton and across. That's a scary spot, and people are. Maybe I'm saying this mostly so the chief can hear me, so he can. No. but I'm earnestly. It's very much on the community, the town. This neighborhood's mine. That's all.
Sorry, I'm being told I have to talk into the microphone, so I apologize for
sure.
the weird reaching. And I think we appreciate that. We recognize that this is a shift and that takes, people can hold two things, that they're not happy about the immediate impact to their, if those of you that live in the community, and recognizing that this may be a better choice for Melrose as a whole, like we could hold two things at once. But I think this is an opportunity for us to have conversations with you all over the coming year about things like that. So we really see this as the start of that engagement with this neighborhood. We have not started that engagement with those neighborhoods that will also be impacted by construction, but the buildings already are in their current use. So we recognize it's been a big undertaking. We're going to be talking with a lot of residents over the next 7 years as these projects start to unfold.
Hello, my name is Chrisella Milios. I am the wife of the gentleman over there, so I'm also a direct abutter at 290 West Foster Street. I promise we will be good neighbors if this ends up there. We have a joke board that your officers will find funny. So I wanted to emphasize a couple of things. So we've been in Melrose for 6 years. I served in the PTO. I serve on the board of the Melrose Education Foundation. We are a super tight-knit neighborhood in that neighborhood. I care deeply about Melrose, and I care deeply about the services that both of you gentlemen provide. However, it is obviously a big change for all of us. I did not love the way it was introduced to us, that there is no voice of our community in the surrounding area, even reacted to. And with all due respect, thank you to Rob for coming and finding us in a random Sunday or Saturday, I don't know what day it was, that we tripped over this information. So that's disappointing, and for me, it's starting at a place of mistrust from the get-go, which is unfortunate. However, we can all get there, and hopefully you'll be much more inclusive in our voices in the community. We are not against this, at least I should say I am not against this. I am against being put into this position where I have to come and put forth kind of my displeasure with people who I respect deeply within my community. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you are looking to include the community. We are, as I said, a tight neighborhood. We have barbecues together, we have fire pits together, and we are in and out of each other's homes. And right now it's being treated that this is just, and Chief, I know that you didn't mean to say it like this, but this isn't a campus, it's a neighborhood, right? And I know your intent was, and I want your intents to be seen, but it is, with all due respect to the architects, the building looks not friendly, not neighborhood friendly. It looks, is the vegetation going to be, throughout the community, so it doesn't look, scary and brutish. Is there, the park is going to be gone right next to the BB school. There's a park. It's a crummy park, but we still go, and the kids take advantage of it. So that's going to be gone, and that's unfortunate. That's green space, which Melrose is already tight on, at least on our side of the town. There's plenty of green spaces in other sections, but in our side of the town, that green space is going to be an elimination. So we are ready to be good neighbors, but we need a little bit more trust. And plus, I'd love to talk to, and I know I'm going to get to a question, I promise, but I'd love to hear a little bit about what does it look like to be a Melrose police station. Our kids are running around all the time. Are there individuals that are going to be popping in that we don't want our kids to be around? What does it look like to have holding, like I read the holding facilities on there, who is in those holding facilities, what does that transaction look like in the day-to-day? So thank you for listening to my ramble.
Thank you for those questions, Seixas. Thank you for those comments. Obviously, we will be working more closely with the community. I don't want to say this just came up overnight, but again, I just want to reiterate, at the time, it was the best alternative back when we were thinking of the Ripley, and then things changed. And we have a responsibility, I think, as taxpayers and community members to do what's best for us overall. And ultimately, we all know this in real life, we're never going to please everybody. If we were doing this and it was at the Ripley, we'd have constituents like yourself complaining about the Ripley. That doesn't underscore what you're saying, and I hear you, what you're saying. The holding cells, detention cells, you probably saw up in the diagram, kind of anticipated that, right? We talked about that. I can tell you a couple things about that. And knock on wood, we're a pretty good community. We don't make a lot of real violent criminal arrests. Having said that, again, back to the we're going to build for 50 years. Who knows where we're going to go? Certain accreditation standards we need to meet, so we need to have jail cells. We're a police station. Can't get around that. What I can tell you right now is we very rarely hold anyone for a significant period of time or overnight. If court's open, regular business hours, they go right to court. If court's not open, most of them are eligible for bail, and we try to get them out of there. But not to go too far off on a topic, we partnered with the Middlesex Sheriff's Department. It's called the Safe Keep Program. It's perfect for us right now because our jail cells are from Barney Fife era. You wouldn't want to be in our jail cell. We have an agreement with them, as do other communities. If they can't make bail or if they're going to be here, they go up there. They go up to Billerica. So generally, off hours, weekends, nights, there's nobody staying for a significant period of time. They go up to Billerica, then they go to court on when the next court opens. So to be transparent, yeah, we're a police department. We're going to lock up bad guys. There will be bad guys in that place, but it's designed perfectly with the Sally Port. If you can see that online somewhere, hopefully, where it's around the back, it's secured. The way we designed the previous place that I was at, everything is you can't get in without fobs. You know, door shuts here, door shuts here. They can't even escape, knock on wood.
Okay.
So easy for me to say, but I wouldn't worry about a prisoner escaping and running through the neighborhood.
Okay.
We don't get a lot of walk-ins, which is good, I guess. So there shouldn't be really much additional traffic. And I know the abutters everybody has lives. I would welcome you if you have downtime during the day or whenever. Sit across the street, grab a coffee, sit in that parking lot by the Regina's there, and just maybe watch, like see, because it's probably not going to change much in the immediate future of the amount of people coming in and out, the amount of cruises going in and out. Might alleviate some of your fears that this isn't going to be like an MBTA train station of just like people going in and out. Hopefully that helps you a little bit.
Thank you, it
Yeah.
does.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank
Sure.
you very much.
Sure.
Lisa Loveland. I live on Florence Street, right around the corner. I want to follow up on her questions because that's where my questions were going. So if somebody makes bail, they're going to be released to West Foster Street. They're walking out of the building if they make bail. Is there going to be any transportation for them to the location that they should be going to, or will they be just let out on West Foster Street? And then just a quick follow-up, numbers. How many holding cells do you currently have, and how many holding cells are in that plan? Because it looks like there's a significant difference.
There's not much of a significant difference. Paul, what do we have, 6 or so? In the juvenile cell. So I hope you could hear the lieutenant.
Yeah, I could, yeah.
We have about 5 or 6. In the new one, we have 6 as well.
Okay, because it looks like there's a whole lot more
Yeah,
there.
We have our ace in the hole with Cassie, but we keep in touch with the Department of Public Health and up to date on best practices and code requirements for holding folks. And there are sight and sound separation issues, and there are obviously gender and certainly juvenile security concerns. So it does take up more space to allow for that proper day-to-day operation for police staff. So the current, I don't know if you've been in the current police station.
I actually have, yes.
If one can imagine if an officer is bringing in the occasional person who's maybe a little rowdy, it's terrifying to imagine getting them downstairs and into that little hallway and into one of those cells. This mitigates all that by really giving the appropriate room needed to process folks.
Right. If I can just add to that, and I know Glenn talked about that. So there's certain accreditation standards, there's certain inspection standards through the state that we have to have, and we actually just had a surprise inspection the other day in Melrose. So they're constantly popping in, making sure that we're safe, everything is correct. But that sight and sound component is very important. So that's why if you look at the design, there'll be like 4 here and 2 here. Because if you have a female or a male at the same time, you can't put them in the same area. So you have to have different cell blocks, for lack of a different term, as well as juveniles. So you have to comply with that.
Right, but I'm just, so
Yeah.
I'm looking at the plan. It looks like there's a whole lot more rooms in the holding facility than 6. So I guess my question is, what is going
So
on there?
so without kind of seeing it, there's, in addition to jail cells, where we just hold them temporarily, there's a booking area that you have to bring them in and do all the booking like you see on television. There's another holding area when you get them out of the cruiser. If they're not ready to be booked, you can put them in that room and you wait. Then there'll be a bail officer room where they get set for bail, and then they'll, hopefully be released. To your other comment, which I didn't address, about walking out onto West Foster Street, it's no different than it is now. It's just 3 blocks away. But yes, that can happen. Generally, they get picked up by somebody, but, constitutionally, if they make bail and they have the money and there's no place for them to go, we're still working with the OICs on getting like an Uber account or something on behalf of the city to get these people, because that just helps us, right? If they're out of city and they have no transportation, and this is more for victims as well, witnesses, but just to have that ability, not to be like, hey, get out of our city, but let's get you back safely somewhere so you're not walking the streets where we may have just picked you up from.
But you leave your facility now. There's a bus station across the street.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to get out of town, you're going to the bus station. Whereas if you're on West Foster Street, you are in the middle of a very tight-knit neighborhood.
And it's also not unheard of. We often sometimes will drive people to train stations and otherwise just to assist them to get. So that's not out of the ordinary. If we just, especially if it's 3 in the morning or something, and they have, the trains wouldn't be open, but I think
Right.
you know what I'm saying. We do help them to get where they need to be going. They should not be wandering just around Florence Street and that whole area.
Hi, good evening. My name is Alejandro Suarez. I'm a Melrose resident in 119 Trenton Street. I wanted to say, first of all, Mayor, Chiefs, thank you for having this session. I echo the surprise that we've all received with this, but this is where we are today. Look forward to the several meetings that we will have. And first of all, I wanted to also kind of, as a resident of the area, just highlight that I love reading the joke board. I definitely, when I'm on my run, I stop and I read it. We have our Easter egg hunts together. We do workout together on Saturdays at the Y. So just want to reiterate how close of a community is there. And we would love to welcome you to a community, to our neighborhood, right? And yes, it's a neighborhood. We want this project to be successful. We approved it, right? Whether you voted for it or not, it's approved by us as residents. So please look at these series of meetings as a way for us to work together. And as a result, I wanted to ask the advisory committee, because I don't expect you to have the answers here today, but to look at the broader area, not just the lot size, but also the incoming street, West Foster. If you ever try to drive through and maybe when you have the big engine driving through, it's very difficult for it to just get through the street on West Foster right after the railroad tracks. So it would be a shame to have this building and not be able to access it, just because West Foster is a very tight road. So there might be a need to modify the road itself so that this is a successful project. So please take that into consideration, which are things that probably were not part of the previous site, right? So now you have to zoom out a little bit and look at the broader. Same thing with Trenton Street. So Trenton Street has a 0.93 score on the high priority of traffic calming. And if you think about it, it's really the main access going south to get to West Wyoming. That is also a very tight road. That's where I live. So every day, I'm just amazed at the fact that we can have the cars going in, never mind the emergency vehicles, right? So that's my request for the advisory committee. So when we meet again, I would like to have this point addressed of the broader neighborhood. But again, thank you so much for these meetings. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Diane Gonzalez. I'm at 254 West Foster, so across from the current BB School playground. Can you go back to the previous slide which shows it on the site. Yeah. So I guess my one question is, looking at the way the building is situated here, it looks like it's skewed a little bit from the current footprint of the BB school, and it's more over towards the right. So it looks like there's less open space between the building and the BB estate. Is that true? Am I looking at that correctly?
It's close, the footprints are pretty close. The closer you get to West Foster Street, the distance to the side is similar, but as the building goes straight back, it does, instead of being at that skewed angle that BB's at, it is more orthogonal to the street front, which in effect puts it a little closer to the Milano Center and to BB.
Okay.
So
So, I mean, currently there's like trees there, so I assume those trees will all have to come down and as part of the building process.
Right, and be replaced and
And
added
will
to,
they,
right,
and will they be replaced, I guess is
Yes.
one question. Okay. And I guess my other just question or comment is, I was a little disappointed to, I guess, see the vision of what the building is going to look like, because you mentioned, it being part of this campus, which I think it is a good way to think of it, because you've got the BB Estate there, you've got the Milano Senior Center there. And it would be nice, I think, from the neighborhood perspective, if it fit in better architecturally with those other buildings that it's sharing a campus with. It looks like a very urban police station, and not like a neighborhood building. So if there is, a way to address that and
Yes.
kind of the vision of how it looks and will fit into the neighborhood.
We hear you, and I'm sure the facilities advisory folks hear you as well. The good news is the floor plans, the space needs, the adjacencies, frankly, the building superstructure that's being designed right now isn't going to change much. The exterior look is absolutely negotiable, right? And the flat roof versus pitch roof is a cost, and especially with a net zero building, which we haven't really touched on. We'll want to maximize as much roof space as we can for solar panels, but if there's a higher priority placed on sort of a more traditional or residential aesthetic, I think you mentioned, well, your neighbor mentioned Situate, among others, right? The superstructure and the infrastructure in the building is the same regardless, so we're happy to work through these discussions.
Okay. Thank you.
You can go next. Yeah, hi, my name is Forrest Tiedemann. I live in Orr Street in Melrose Highlands. And so I'm not in the exact neighborhood here, but just thinking here as a City of Melrose resident and thinking of how beautiful the BB Estate house is and how much the Milano Center is used, I take a look at this picture right here, and it seems like literally you're almost parking right into the BB Estate building. I mean, and I'm wondering how flexible can we be as far as can we build this out so we don't have all these parking spaces that essentially cover up all this, not just the existing playground, but also this area around these two buildings where we also have events outside from time to time in the good weather, and it really intrudes on that and being able to have some of these events. And just thinking, like earlier this year, my wife hosted a wedding shower for our daughter there at the BB Estate, and one of the really nice things about it is that it's kind of open and wasn't busy, and there's not like parking spaces. It literally looks like right next to the building itself. And so it seems that if it's possible, is there a way to sort of modify that a bit? And I understand there's some openness on how many parking spots you need for the public, and you're trying to plan for decades, but it just seems, looking at that, it's like, and as you mentioned, there are parking spots there by the Milano Center that wouldn't be very far, just a 50-yard walk at max, right? So anyway, that's just my input, is like, there's probably other parts about this that also, can there be some modifications, which I'm not as familiar with, like on the back side of it and so forth. But to me, it seems pretty evident that the parking spots are kind of intrusive, especially on the historic house.
Hi, Frank Wright, 191 Florence Street. 30-year resident of the neighborhood. A lot of our neighbors are here, as you've heard, real tight neighborhood. A lot of us have been there a long time. A lot of people are new. Still, we mix really well. We look forward to being part of the process. I saw your, I guess the term is rendering of the building, the drawing of the building as initially drawn, and
Yep.
I
Kind of a
appreciate your comments that it's
concept
just a
rendering.
concept.
Yeah.
I think what would be helpful for us, in addition to everything we've heard tonight, is some discussion of lighting and flexibility on lighting. Again, you're taking a large building and dropping it in a tight-knit neighborhood. I know it was a school, but a school is 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. This will be 24/7 operation. So lighting is important. The other thing is, and people have touched on this, is looking at this design, it's a large building sitting in a big parking lot. And I think it would be nice, besides the concept of the building, to see that attitude of what it would look like from the street level with the green space. So we look forward to being part of the process going forward.
Yeah, same.
And having the building, if it's going to be in our neighborhood, fit in our neighborhood. So thank you.
Hi, Julie DeLillo. I am not an abutter, but I want to speak to probably one of your biggest abutters, which is the seniors. The seniors across the street, they are constantly out there. They're on the sidewalks, they're sitting, they're doing things. And to please consider and take into account when all that construction is going on, that you are going to disrupt a whole lot of people who live in that building. And so be very curious to hear, because we haven't talked about them, is what is the thought process around when all that construction is going on? Where are these folks going to be able to go? How does it affect them, right, as they're sitting outside, right? If you've ever been around there, well, the people that live there are around there. But they're carvings, they're sitting, so how is that going to affect them?
Sounds like another one for me. That's actually a great point. I think that speaks more to, as we get closer to bidding time and when contractors are gearing up, we want to make sure that maybe they set up their offices and the places they start the heavy equipment in the morning away from that side of the site. We're not quite into that level of detail yet, but I think that's invaluable to hear that perspective and understand really how to be sensitive to that side of the site. They don't have a giant 20-foot wall separating them, right? Nope. So we hear you. That's a great point.
Hi, my name is Rebecca McKenzie. I'm at 309 West Foster, so I'm 2 doors down from what's currently the BB school. First, I just wanted to say I really love this police force. I've loved the community aspect of this police department. I don't think our kids have had a lemonade stand where a police officer hasn't shown up and given them a $20 bill. So we are really excited for you to get a nicer building. You certainly deserve it. I think the neighbors, though, I think we feel very kind of in the dark about this process. And, tonight we're seeing these designs for the very first time. And I have to admit, I'm really disappointed by the look of it. Just the design is very imposing. If we look at our police station that we have today, I know it certainly has a lot to be desired, but it does kind of fit with the landscape of this town we live in. And so I would really encourage the team just to go back to the design board and just try to make it blend in with a residential neighborhood better, because that is something that's really big concern of ours. We've loved having the library 2 doors down from our house for the past few years. We knew it was temporary, but we've also just been kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop and hoping that we don't have a huge disruption to our lives.
Just a couple thoughts to help the neighbors. And this has been addressed with some other bigger buildings. Setting the second floor back even just 2 feet can really overall reduce the visual impact in an area. and just changing out maybe some of the glass. But the other thing is more heavily landscaping the front, because you will have lights on all the time. And as he said about the parking lot, covering that, I see bushes, a row of bushes, but having more mature trees throughout the project to really cover so you're not seeing the parking lot a lot. But also the parking for the public, if you could route the traffic to go to the back of that area, there's 6 spaces there. That would cover probably most of your public needs for 90% of the time, but that would leave that area in the entry, where it is, open for organic use for the neighborhood, like similar to the common with what used to be the tennis courts, for kids to use their bikes outside off the street, and that might help tie it into the neighborhood. They're not fully losing that park space, but you would still 95% of the time have your parking space, but also more heavily landscape the front to reduce that and set it back.
I'm going to change the subject. I just wanted to know. My name is Cindy Farah. I live in the Lincoln School area, 56 Converse Lane. I wanted to know about the fire station. The central fire station is the one that's really bad, and they had the Northeast students fix it. What is your plans for that one? I know you made this big one on Tremont Street, which we've seen it do that, but what's the take place? Are you going to fix that one? You're going to house the central, or are you going to use the one on Tremont Street as your central? That's my question. Where was the money going to? I just wanted to know that.
Thank you for a break from the fabulous BB folks.
Yes.
But that is a great question.
I'm very upset about the fact that we weren't fixing that one first. But now I understand that you're rebuilding the other one to house that, but what do you plan on doing with the one? Because that needs to, I think it needs to come down and be rebuilt. The brick on it, everything is pretty well shot. That's what I feel. I've been here for almost 26 years, and I watched the police and fire, everything dilapidate, and nobody put any money toward it, and it's been really upsetting me for the past 26 years. 27 years. So I am glad that I voted for this. I know this is a whole different thing. I am upset that the fact that this was not presented earlier when you guys all talked about it. The newspapers do not give out good information. All the city needs to be a part of everything. That's what I feel. Not just the BB district, the school, this area, it needs everywhere, because it affects everybody. And I feel our papers, our websites aren't doing a good enough job doing that. So anyway, going back to the fire station, what were you going to do with that?
We are going to reoccupy headquarters.
Okay.
We're not sure exactly how it's going to happen yet. We are constrained because it is on several historic
Yeah.
things. We're confined to the very footprint it's on.
Is that what it is?
So that's what we have to do. We just have to really take a good hard look at how much we can salvage from that building as it stands and make it design. And naturally, I've worked in that building for 35 years, and I understand your frustration.
I am very sad for you guys. That's why.
But,
and I pay money. We pay taxes for you, and it just,
No,
you know.
and I understand, but we are going to have it look very similar, I believe, to what it looks like
Is it going to
now.
be big enough to house, because,
Yes,
the other
it
one
will.
looks bigger.
Right, it is bigger because we don't have storage space throughout our 3 stations we have now.
Right.
So the engine 2 on Tremont Street, engine 3 on East Foster Street will have most of our storage.
Yes.
Whereas headquarters will still store, or the ladder truck will still run out of that.
Okay.
With an ambulance.
Okay.
Probably will end up being housed there along with the captain on duty and the officers of the fire department.
Okay, because I remember taking my daughter when she used to go to preschool. We used to go to visit that whole thing, and I just, back then, 20-some years ago, it wasn't looking very good then, and I used to say, why didn't anybody fix this? Why isn't our money going toward fixing the fire department? So that's all I wanted to say. So now I know. What about the one by the Common? Is that one going to be updated too?
That one will come down.
Okay.
And we'll, we haven't got to the design phase of that one yet, but they all have to, since we don't have any temporary space, we have to start with engine 2, get that built.
Okay.
Then we can relocate the headquarters company with them.
Okay.
So it has to facilitate both while headquarters is being done.
Okay.
And then once those 2 are done, engine 3 will come down, probably at headquarters or at engine 2 while they do that.
And how many years do you think that'll be? Is that
7 or 8 years.
okay? By the time it fully gets there.
Exactly.
3 phases. Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here and for all the work that you've done this far.
Thank you.